Hello there, welcome to Genesis Models and a Merry Christmas to you all over the holidays. This is going to be a nice little tip or trick video. I'm going to be making this for Airfix, and what this basically is I'm going to be showing you how to sort of paint and weather your detailed areas on a model in probably what I believe is the most easiest and simplest way to do it. Our test subject here is going to be the Fury FB11 export. That's by Airfix and it's 1/48 scale. Really nice kit. I'm going to be taking the wheel wells out of this just to show you this nice little technique, but you can apply it to so many areas. You know, you could put it on in cockpits, figures, anything that has detail in it. And what we're going to do, we're going to just basically paint it. We're going to weather it up in the most easiest way possible, where we will be showing shadows, dirt, grime, highlights and all those good stuff to really liven up our paintwork in the most easiest way possible. So here we have our wheel well just here, and all I've done is I've just primed this up black, just straight up black, just to nicely prime this up ready for what's going to be the main colour we're going to spray on this. But before we do that, I want to do a nice little bit of what we call pre-shading. It is a little bit tricky if you've just started out using the airbrush, so I'm going to show you a really nice sort of easy way of doing it, so you're not coming in having to have good control over your airbrush and stuff. What we're going to do is we're going to actually dry brush this on. So we've got matte 34 white, which actually, just by the way, we use matte 33 black for just priming this up. And what we're going to do is we're going to do a bit of dry brushing. Right, dry brushing is an easy technique. It's probably one of the first things you probably should be learning when you first do any kind of modeling or anything like that, because it's so easy and effective. What we're going to do, get a bit of paint on the end of our brush, and just on a kitchen paper towel just here, I'm going to sort of work it into the bristles. Right, and the whole reason why we call it dry brush, right, is because we haven't got a wet brush, we've got like a dry brush, right? Exactly, you know what the name says. So when we sort of paint on it, we're getting a little bit of paint just sort of coming off, right? And you do want to sort of just make sure you just haven't got like a wet paintbrush, because it does sort of ruin it if you do. But basically, when we start dry brushing on here, we want to be, you know, start off light. Just start off light, just to make sure you haven't overloaded your paintbrush too much. Right, and as the paint starts coming off of your brush, you can probably start applying a bit more pressure. So always start off light, and then as you do more, you can get a bit sort of rougher with it. Right, and hopefully, as you can see, what's happening with the dry brushing is all that white paint is touching all the raised bits, which is what makes this like a nice sort of bit of a tip for you, is that because we've got all these raised bits of detail, that's getting the paint on it, and all these sort of bits of detail that are sort of deep and recessed, you know, our bristles can't really get onto it, so it doesn't get painted, and thus we end up with bringing out all the detail. Now at this stage, you know, we are going to be spraying on top of this. It's going to get feathered in and everything. So if you haven't done dry brushing before, right, we don't, you know, you can use this as a bit of a sort of a demo, sort of testing to, you know, get used to dry brushing and everything. You don't have to worry about it too much, because you'll see in a bit it's going to get killed off quite a bit. So don't worry too much about making mistakes with your dry brushing with this stage. So there's our bit of dry brushing there, which is nice, going to act as a bit of pre-shading. So this is where we come in with our main colour. Our main colour, I'm going to be using matte 24 by Humbrol. Now I've already nicely mixed this in a colour cup, about 50-50 mixture. If you're not quite sure about airbrushing, there is a Genesis Models tutorial on airbrushing and stuff. Go check out that on the Genesis Models website, and maybe come back to this maybe. But for this, what we want to do is lightly, slowly build up the coats. Right, so I'm going to start off with a light misty coat, right, so that you almost don't notice it going down. right? And that light misted coat is going to help the paint stick better to the model, ready for all our other coats to come. So then what I'm going to do now is I'm going to just press down the trigger, just cut to where it does dry really quickly, these acrylic paints, which is quite useful for us to kind of crack on with this. And then I'm going to come in with a normal light coat. And what I mean by a normal light coat is, you know, you can just nicely spray over it in all the different angles, yeah. But if you start seeing it get wet, move along. Don't let the paint build up and pool up, because you know that's where your paintwork gets a little bit nasty. So that's probably wet enough just now. And hopefully what you can see is that bit of pre-shading we did with the dry brushing. All those raised areas are looking that little bit lighter than all the areas that didn't get the dry brushing, i.e. all our little recessed areas. They're looking quite black, and it just gives our paintwork that little bit more life than just plain simply being a flat matte 24 by Humbrol. So there she is, all nicely finished up. Now the one trick to this that you've got to remember is when to stop spraying, right? You know, you might be spraying onto black, but if you keep spraying that yellow down and keep spraying it down, you're going to completely cover up any sort of pre-shading, kill it all off, and you'll just end up with a flat yellow color. But if you just slowly work yourself into the different coats, one after the other, you should end up with this. It kind of gives it a little bit more of an interesting look, as you can see. And how easy was that? And we've only just done a little bit of spraying, but what I want to do now is create the shadows and everything. So a good one for that is a wash. For this I'm going to be using our nice dark brown wash by Humbrol. Really nice colour that complements our yellow just nicely, as well as some enamel thinners as well, because this stuff is a little bit thick for what I want it for, but thinning down is nice and easy. What we're going to do is, when thinning down our paints, what we want to do, starting off with the thinners, always start off with the thinners. We want about a 50-50 mix, just to keep our thinners nice and clean, right? We've got a nice clean paintbrush, we dip into our thinners, right, and we just nicely dab in a nice bit in there. Maybe my paintbrush isn't as clean as it should be, but still, right? So then when we dip into our nice brown wash here, doesn't matter having a bit of thinners on your paintbrush, should be the same thing, and then we mix that to a nice 50-50 mix. Now what you're sort of trying to get after here is this kind of a mixture. If you kind of like tip your paintbrush just on the side, right, you'll see it flow down quite nicely, and you're looking for that sort of transparency to it, right? But to help our paint flow, and this is a nice little trick just here, I'm just going to quickly clean my paintbrush off for this, right, just to get our paint flowing nicely and everything into all the nice nooks and crannies. And what we don't want the wash to sort of sit on any flat areas. We want it to go into all recesses, nooks and crannies, recessed panel lines, recessed rivets, all that kind of stuff. So if we just dip into our thinners, right, and what we want to do is just paint the thinners onto our piece just here. Now we don't want to paint it on so it is absolutely saturated, right, to where there's pools of this going on. We want this nice light film, this nice equal sort of filter or a glaze of our thinners just here, right? Not too much at all, really sort of be careful. If you do find that, oh, you know, it's pulled up in an area a little bit too much, right, all you got to do, get your paintbrush, dab it on a kitchen paper towel so your paintbrush kind of dries, and you can suck it up with your paintbrush, right? So with that, with a nice bit of thinners on there, we can now go to our 50-50 mixture, dip into there, and then paint this on. It should help it flow that little bit better. Right, and again, you know, you don't want this to pool up too much in certain areas. Right, and there we go. You know, it's really starting to show all the detail off. Now as you can see there, it's a little bit pulled up just there. So again, I'm just going to tap it on a kitchen paper towel, and we should be able to suck that up. Right, not too much that it goes completely away, but hopefully, as you can see, that's moving along quite nicely. And there you go, after putting that wash down, as you can see already instantly that is looking pretty damn effective, and already that's been pretty easy to do. Now you want to let this dry. There is another stage I'm going to do to this. I mean, if you want to keep things basic, you can always just leave it as that, because as you can see it does look good just like that. What I'm going to do now is a bit more dry brush, and I want to bring out some highlights actually on this. As I say, this is kind of an optional sort of thing. Now I'm going to come straight in with our matte 24 just here. Now I know this is the same colour, and you might think it's not really going to make much of a difference, but what you got to remember is that wash that we used, our dark brown just here, that has actually darkened up our yellow, and it's basically turned it into a new colour, right? So actually coming back with our original colour isn't going to hurt. It's not going to be, shall we say, a massive amount of highlights to it, but it's a nice base to bring it along. We are going to do a second stage of dry brushing, but what we're going to do, open up our pot. Always good to just, you know, go neat as well. There's no need to sort of thin down dry brushing, you know, the thicker the paint the better. On a kitchen paper towel just here, I'm just making our dry brush just like we did with our white, doing our bit of pre-shading, making our brush all nice and dry, but with a bit of paint on. Now this time you want to be a bit more careful, because this is, you know, highlighting this. You want to be careful not to kind of just go too much or have your paint too wet, right? A little bit more careful, starting off nice and light, right? And you should lightly see these raised areas sort of lighten up, right? But you're not gonna notice that much. I mean, the one thing with weathering and that kind of stuff, it's not a process that's done in one technique. It's one of these things that you know, lightly do a technique here, you lightly do a technique there, and then all that creates a bigger picture of a really nice bit of weathering, right? So I don't know how much you can notice there, but it does sort of kind of give us a little bit more life, ready for the next stage of dry brushing. So there's a nice bit of highlights going on there, but I want to sort of enhance that a little bit more. One thing I did forget to mention is when putting washes down, they're great for recesses and all those kind of detail areas, but if they ever go onto like a flat area, they can look a little bit off, almost like a little bit of a watermark maybe here and there. And that dry brushing is basically going to be you know, going onto the flat areas as well, and sort of feathering in those kind of maybe watermarks that can sometimes be left behind as well. So I do like it for that. Now the next thing I'm going to do is do a nice last bit of dry brushing. I'm going to be using our matte 24 and 34, so I'm going to be mixing a little bit of white, right, to create a, shall we say, a nice lighter colour to really sort of give us a good highlight. So just on this kitchen paper towel, I'm trying to just make a nice 50-50 mix. Just get out another paintbrush to keep things clean and not to contaminate pots or anything. Right, so a nice sort of 50-50 mix to really sort of lighten this up. Right, let's maybe bring you on this main camera just here, and already you can see where I've been sort of dry brushing the difference in shade. So we've got a nice lighter colour just there. So with our lighter shade now, we want to prep our dry brush, get some paint on it, make it all sort of nice and dry and ready to go. And with this one, we want to be really sort of nice and light. We don't want to overpower it, so start off nice and slow. All right. Get all those raised areas lightening up. And hopefully you could sort of see how, you know, it looks a little bit lighter than say this side, and it just gives us that extra nice effect. And so there she is, all nicely painted up. As you can see, that final bit of highlighting using the dry brush has lightened up some of those nice raised surfaces. And you know, it's got to be said, I mean, for that kind of effect and to get those kind of results, this was pretty easy. I mean, let's face it, all we did was spray on, no fancy spray work, spray on a nice simple base matte 24, a bit of dry brushing, followed by using a wash that's, you know, all good to go. Maybe just thin it a little bit, which was probably the hardest part, really, was like thinning your wash about 50-50. But really, you know, that was it. And I think you've got to agree, considering the kind of techniques that were used and everything, you know, the results can be really, really nice. I know when I do stuff like this, with my normal videos and stuff, I'll be using all sorts of different techniques, which, you know, does take experience, does take time, is kind of more delicate getting smaller paint brushes and painting stuff on, you know, especially the highlights. Highlights can be quite a tricky thing to actually do if you get out those tiny paint brushes and actually paint the highlights in and sort of feather them in. Oh yeah, it can get really sort of advanced and technical and very time consuming, but you know, for those kind of results and those kind of techniques and how quick it was and how easy it was, you know, I think it's a good one to try out, which I hope you will over the Christmas holiday. So hopefully you've enjoyed this nice little Airfix sort of sponsored video here to bring you a nice tip and trick over the Christmas holiday. Hope you're going to enjoy your Christmas holiday. Hope you're going to get all of your models and all your goodies that you want over Christmas. And I'm hoping you're going to go off and try this technique on your new models over the Christmas holidays and get painting, get building, and enjoy the hobby for what it is. So hopefully you've enjoyed that. So until next time, my name is Bobby Waldron, this is Genesis Models, and I'll see you later.